Hello there, this is Dominic from Hargreaves Lansdowne. Thank you for signing up for today's webinar. The webinar itself will last around about 15 minutes or so. If you do have any questions at all off the back of this or anything else pensions related, do feel free to contact us. I'll pop up some details towards the end and hopefully we can answer any kind of questions that you have. The webinar is information as opposed to financial advice. So it's simply there to give you a few basic details around the state pension to make sure that a lot of us are on the same page in our understanding. There are other webinars available that are being run throughout this week, so do feel free to attend if there's anything else that you want a bit more information about. So here's today's agenda. Firstly, we'll have a look at how much the state pension might be. We'll cover that briefly. It will differ on your circumstances, so we'll discuss a few of those in a bit more detail. We'll then look at how the state pension has changed. There's been quite a bit of change over time, so we'll focus in on those changes. And we'll discuss the impact of contracting out. Quite a few people did this in kind of years gone, so we'll just explain a bit more about what that was and what impact that might have had. And then finally, we'll talk about what happens if you were to retire abroad, which I suppose is one thing that quite a lot of people have in mind as what they would like to do when they're ready to retire. So we'll just explain a bit more around that. So first things first, the state pension as it stands at the moment, if you're entitled to the full amount, is around £9,100 per year. That will differ depending on your circumstances. One such factor that will make a difference to how much you could receive is your national insurance record. Now, you need 35 years of national insurance contributions to be entitled to the full state pension. If you have at least 10 years of national insurance contributions, then you'll have some sort of entitlement at a pro-rated amount. But it's 35 that you'll need to be entitled to the full state pension of 9,100. Now, in terms of when you access that, that's probably the change that's got the most kind of news coverage and is most well known at the moment, is that the age in which you're entitled to the state pension is changing. Now, 65 is the age that it has been for some time. It's kind of slowly moving to age 68. So it'll be 67 by 2028 and potentially move to 68 beyond that. If you're aged 42 or over, it's worth checking online to see what your state pension age would be, and I'll put up the address towards the end. But it'll vary between 65 to 68. If you're fortunate, or in this case unfortunate enough, to be aged under 42, the state pension age is rising to 68. It may well rise beyond that. I think the issue is that what we're seeing is we have an aging population. People are living a lot longer. There's more and more people out there, and the reality is it's quite a big strain on the state. So there has been this change or this trend to push the state pension age back. Now, there are different rules out there. There was the old state pension, which was actually termed as the basic state pension. And that was for those who retired before the 5th of April 2016. Another difference here was that you actually only needed 30 years of national insurance contributions to be entitled to the full basic state pension, which was around £6,360 per year. Whereas with the new state pension, as long as you have 10 years of contributions, you'll have some sort of entitlement. With the basic state pension, the old method, there was no such minimum in place there. With the old state pension, your spouse or civil partner may have been entitled to some kind of extra basic state pension based on your national insurance record, but only if they didn't already have the full state pension or the full state pension entitlement. And that's another difference as of the 6th of April 2016, is that there's no kind of spousal allowance in place there. The new state pension is applicable to those of you, if you're a male born after the 6th of April 1951, or a female born 6th of April 1953 or beyond. And it's, again, recapping 35 years of national insurance record. The amount you're entitled to is a higher amount of 9,110. Something that will affect the amount you're entitled to is whether or not you contracted out. Now, contracting out is not something you're able to do any longer. It kind of ceased to exist with the basic state pension in 2016. But previously, you had the option, if you wanted to based on your earnings to build up a second state pension, or something that was termed as SERPS, which is the State Earning Related Pension Scheme. If you chose not to build up those extra years of contributions of national insurance, you instead either reduce the payments that you made or had those national insurance contributions diverted into a workplace or a personal pension that you had set up. And as such, because you weren't making those national insurance contributions, you're actually reducing the starting amount for the new state pension. So there could be some implications there in that you might have less at retirement from the state than you expected if you did contract out. It's worth checking this online. So again, there is a website which is really useful to look at, and we'll put that up towards the end, where if you pop in your details, it will tell you if indeed you were contracted out, if you have built up any additional state pension through the state second pension or through what they call SERPs. A benefit of the new state pension is something called the triple lock, and I think when we talk about the state pension, it can seem a bit negative because the amount that you get, and if you're just relying on that, that may not be enough to live the lifestyle that you've had in mind. So it's really down to your workplace pensions to bridge that gap. And actually, some people are quite surprised to hear that it may be beyond 65. It might be the age that you're able to access it. So it's quite good that we can talk about something positive, which is the triple lock, which means the amount that you get per year will increase by the highest of three separate figures. It will either be the average wage, average earnings in that tax year or the prior tax year, a measure of inflation known as CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, or 2.5%. So whichever is highest, the state pension will increase by that amount. Another way to look at this would be a minimum increase per year of 2.5%, because you've kind of got that floor in there with the 2.5% factor. So, for example, last tax year, the state pension, if you're entitled to the full amount, was about 8,750. Now we're looking at about 9,100. And the idea is that the issue in retirement, I suppose, or one of the issues, is that over time, things that we buy on a daily basis, they increase in cost. We have inflation taking place. So if your state pension doesn't adapt to that and stays at a fixed figure in 20 or 30 years' time, which you may well kind of be in retirement for a period of that long, it's possible that you can't buy as much as you could when you first set up the state pension, and your purchasing power could decrease. So having the triple lock set in is a really positive thing, because it means that it'll keep its purchasing power over time. Back a few years ago, around about 2017, I think, in recent memory, there was talk of it moving to a potential double lock, which would remove that 2.5% floor. As of yet, there's not been any further movement with that. So as far as we're aware, unless legislation was to change, the triple lock is what will remain in place. Another way that you could look at building up the state pension that you receive is by deferring the amount, or deferring when you access the state pension. So if you were reaching the state pension age before April 2016, you could actually increase the amount that you receive per year by 1% for every 5 weeks that you defer those payments. Or if you choose to defer accessing your state pension for an entire year, you would receive an extra 10.4% when you do come to draw from the state pension. The rules post-April 2016 would be that if you defer for 9 weeks, you receive an additional 1%. And for a whole year of deferral, you receive an extra 5.8%. One factor here is, from the outset, it looks great. I mean, you defer your pension, you receive an extra 5.8%, for example, for deferring it a year. But you will have to take into consideration that year that you've deferred, you weren't receiving any state pension at that point. So you may well have to kind of live a lot longer to then see the returns on deferring that state pension. So that is one thing that you might need to think about. If you're ever unsure on what to do, you may want to seek financial advice in that regard. In regards to retiring abroad, that was one of the key things that we wanted to discuss in this webinar and to point out. There are a few considerations here. The main thing here is that you have to claim the state pension within 4 months if you're leaving the UK to retire. So claim within 4 months of your state pension age. You have a choice of payment. It can either be every 4 or every 13 weeks. Now, that being said, if your per annum amount from the state pension is only £260 or less, then it's an annual figure paid in December. We talked about the triple lock being quite a positive thing that's built in. Now, it will only, the triple lock will only take place if you're retiring in the European Economic Area, Switzerland or Gibraltar, or countries with a social security agreement with the UK. That's something to look at before you move abroad, when you're kind of doing a lot of admin around that and making sure that your state pension is there, because it's likely that's something that you still want to rely on because you've built up your national insurance record, you've paid into the UK government's pension system, so it's worthwhile ensuring that you will be entitled to that when retiring abroad. Although it's applicable to those countries with a social security agreement with the UK, that's discounting Canada and New Zealand, so that's not something that they would allow. So a few things to think about, I suppose, with the state pension. It's not just as simple as reaching the state pension age and having that paid to you. There are quite a few things to think about to make sure it's suitable for you and you're getting the most out of what the state can offer, as it is a little bit more flexible than perhaps you might have thought before. The state pension is unlikely to provide you with the ideal income that you have in mind for retirement, but it is a starting point. Really, your personal and workplace pensions can help bridge the gap between what the state offers and what you actually need in retirement. And as I've said, there's a few other webinars which are available, which give you a better idea about what you might need and how you go about building up personal or workplace pensions. And of course, through the Hargreaves Lansdown website, you can access quite a few tools which will help you in that sense. If you want to retire before your state pension age, you may well want to ensure that you have enough savings in your pension that you set up through your workplace or personally, because personal pensions can be accessed up to 10 years before the state pension. So currently 55 is the earliest that you could access pension schemes outside of what the state offers. So do take the time to think about how much you might need. If the state pension isn't enough, it's about assessing what you have in your private pensions. So looking at how much you're putting in, where that money is then invested, and what other assets you have outside of that to provide you with the income that you'll need in retirement. So to recap what we've covered today, currently the state pension, if you're entitled to the full amount with those 35 years of full national insurance contributions, will be around £9,100 per annum. Consider whether you contract it out, because if that sounds familiar, there's a chance that you might be entitled to less than the 9,100. This is something that I'd implore you to check with the government website, which is gov.uk/check state pension. You can see it on the screen there. Check it out. It's something that's quite a good website, to be honest. You pop in your details. If you have a government gateway account set up, you can use those details, and it will tell you how many years you've built up, which years were perhaps not full, and so on, if that's relevant. And it will tell you in plain English how much you'd be entitled to per year or per week. So it's quite a useful tool to have, and I'd say it's really important when you're looking at what you'd be entitled to in retirement. I do remember rules can change. A positive change will be that the triple lock is in place. So as of next tax year, there'll be a change with the state pension there, in that it should increase in line with that lock under current rules. But the government can and do have the flexibility to make amendments. Our job as a pension provider is really to keep people up to date on our website with any movements on that. So you've heard a bit from me today and from Hargreaves Lansdown. There are many other tools available to you, and it's really wise to speak to many different companies and organisations that can offer you any kind of information that might be of use. One such organisation is PensionWise, which was introduced in 2015 when the pension freedoms were introduced, which was kind of liberating pensions in a way that means that you could access them much more flexibly in relation to workplace and personal schemes. Now, they do offer free and impartial guidance to anyone aged over 50 with a workplace or personal pension plan. And really their role is to help you understand your options. So although they may not be there to help you in regards to the state pension, if you're looking at the state pension, it's likely you're probably looking at other pensions that you have as well, that they're on hand to assist with that. And they provide specialist pension guidance, usually over the phone, or they might be local to you as well. But if you do want to contact them, it's www.pensionwise.gov.uk, or you can call them on 0800 138 3944. Likewise, any other questions you have, we do have a retirement help desk who are on hand to again provide you with any information that you might need. It's information as opposed to advice, but that might be enough to get you on the right tracks. Of course, if you do want advice, let us know and we can kind of provide the details of our advisory team here at Hargreaves Lansdown. The telephone number for our retirement help desk is 0117 980 9940. You can also contact us by email at retire@hl.co.uk. You're not waiting too long if you give us a call. The average pickup time last year was about 20 seconds. So it's really important to us that you're getting through to someone when you need to talk to us. So thank you for listening to the webinar today. As I say, it's a fairly short one. It is the basic ins and outs of how the state pension would work. Any queries above or beyond that and that you need more assistance with, do feel free to contact myself or the retirement team. We'll be happy to provide you with any information. Now, please do take a minute or two to read through the important investment notes. It explains a bit more detail, and it's really important that you read through that to understand that it's information as opposed to advice, and there's a few bits of details that you might find of use. So please do take the next minute or so to read through this. Okay, thank you for listening. The contact details are there if you do have any queries off the back of this webinar. I hope you found it to be of use, but anything at all, do contact us and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you very much and have a great day.